My husband and his friends blindfolded me for a birthday prank, dumped me at a gas station, and drove off laughing. I never looked back. By the time they realized I was missing, I was already halfway across the ocean, building a new life they could never touch. They thought I'd cry. They thought I'd crawl home, humiliated, begging. They didn't know I had already disappeared long before they untied the scarf. The moment Blake tied it over my eyes, hands rougher than they needed to be, the warning bells had started. But I smiled anyway, laughed with them. Let them load me into the SUV, giggling and joking as if we were all still 19 again. I counted every turn, every bump in the road. I smelled oil and heat and old asphalt. The car windows were down, letting in the humid summer air, thick with the scent of barbecue from distant yards. Someone popped open a beer. Someone else snickered. Max muttered, "She's gonna love this." I clutched the edge of the seat tighter. When the car finally jerked to a stop, the blindfold stayed on. Rough hands pulled me out, gravel crunching under my heels. "Ready for your big surprise?" Blake whispered, and I could feel his grin even without seeing it. The scarf was ripped away. Sunlight seared my eyes. For a moment, everything blurred: bright sky, cracked pavement, and old rusted signs swaying in the breeze. Then clarity. An abandoned gas station. Windows shattered. Roof sagging. Nothing around for miles. I turned instinctively, just in time to see the SUV peeling away, tires kicking up dust, their laughter trailing behind them like smoke. Gone. Just like that. I stood there, alone, in a party dress and heels, my hair whipping in the dry wind, my 35th birthday gift crumbling at my feet. No wallet. No phone. No way home. Only a thin, sharp understanding blooming in my chest. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a joke. This was the final goodbye they hadn't had the guts to say to my face. I could have screamed. I could have chased them. I could have collapsed. But I didn't. I just stood there, felt the roughness of the earth beneath me, breathed in the stillness, and smiled. Because what they didn't know, what they would never know, was that I had already packed my escape plan weeks ago. They thought they were breaking me, but they were setting me free. Today wasn't just my birthday. It was my rebirth. They say marriages don't break overnight. They erode, slowly, silently, like water carving stone. Ours didn't explode. It faded. Blake and I met in college. He was the loud one, charismatic, magnetic, the kind of guy who made everyone feel like they mattered. I was quieter, observant, more likely to stay after class and help the professor clean up than to sneak out for drinks. He called me his grounding wire. Said I made him better. Maybe I did. For a while. Our first apartment was tiny, the kind where you could reach the fridge from the couch. We'd lie on the floor on hot nights, eating popsicles and talking about our dreams. Marriage. A dog. A house with creaky steps and a mailbox with our name on it. We got all those things. And somewhere along the way, I lost myself. At first, it was small. Blake started working later. Happy hours turned into late dinners. I'd call, and he'd silence the phone. Meetings running long, he'd text, "Don't wait up." He stopped complimenting me. Stopped noticing when I wore the dress he once loved or curled my hair for dinner. I told myself he was tired. Stressed. Men aren't as observant. But deep down, I felt it. The slow shrinking of my presence in his world. He used to ask about my day, my work, my friends. Then one day, I realized he hadn't asked in weeks. Birthdays came and went with generic gift cards. Our anniversary? He forgot 1 year entirely. I had spent the day cooking his favorite meal, stuffed shells with garlic bread, lit candles, wore the perfume he bought on our honeymoon. He came home late, smelled like whiskey, muttered something about traffic, and passed out on the couch. I cleaned up alone, ate cold garlic bread, while watching the wax drip down forgotten candles. It became a pattern. Me trying. Him withdrawing. I planned date nights. He canceled last minute. Work crisis. I bought concert tickets. He gave them away to a client. Once, I surprised him at the office with lunch. He wasn't there. His assistant looked nervous. "Oh, I thought he told you. He's out with Brooke." Brooke. That name started surfacing more and more. She was just helping on a project. Just a friend. Works in marketing. I wanted to believe him. I really did. I gaslit myself more than he ever had to. When I found her hairbrush in our bathroom drawer, he said it was mine. When she called at 11 p.m. and he took the call in the garage, he said it was work stuff. When I saw her in a photo at his friend's bachelor party, the party he said was guys only, he claimed it was photoshopped. And I stayed, because admitting the truth would mean everything I'd built was a lie. There were no bruises. No yelling. Just absence. Absence of care. Absence of effort. Absence of love. He stopped showing up emotionally, but he expected me to keep functioning like a wife. Groceries. Laundry. Company dinners where I had to smile and pretend we were happy while Brooke smirked across the table. She'd wear perfume I used to wear. Laugh at his jokes like I used to. Slip into conversations like she belonged. He let her. No, he invited her. There was one night, 2 years before everything fell apart, that still haunts me. It was Christmas Eve. Snow fell gently outside. I had stayed up making his favorite cookies, wrapped presents, played soft jazz through the speakers. I wanted that hallmark moment, even if it was just us. He came home past midnight. Didn't notice the lights I'd strung. Didn't comment on the cookies. "Why are you still up?" he grumbled, tossing his coat over the banister. "I was waiting for you." He didn't answer. Just poured himself a drink and scrolled his phone on the couch. I sat beside him, close enough to touch, hoping for some acknowledgement. He got up halfway through the movie and went to bed without a word. I cried that night. But not loudly. Just quiet tears soaking into the throw pillow. Even Penny, our golden retriever, looked at me like she knew something was wrong. And still, I stayed. Because I told myself it was a rough patch. Because I loved the version of him that existed in the past. Because I thought loyalty meant enduring. But loyalty to someone who treats you like furniture isn't noble. It's self-betrayal. Still, I endured. Until the day I found the email. It was 3 days before my birthday. He had forgotten to log out of his Gmail account on our shared desktop in the home office. The subject line: "Can't wait for this weekend." I clicked. Brooke. Of course. Thread after thread of messages, stretching back months. No, years. Intimate conversations. Hotel confirmations. Pet names. Once she's out of the picture. I froze. Literally. My hands went numb on the keyboard. There was a photo of them at a cabin one he claimed was a solo work retreat. Another of her wearing his hoodie. My hoodie. The one I bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I copied everything. Forwarded it to an email account he didn't know existed. Then I closed the tab, wiped the history, and sat there staring at the blinking cursor. My world had been dying slowly for years. That day it finally flatlined. And I felt nothing. Just a quiet, terrible clarity. He wasn't coming back. Because he had already left. The plan was never meant for my ears. They thought I was out shopping. I had left my keys on the kitchen counter, slipped out through the side door, and circled around the back. I don't know why. Maybe some instinct. Maybe the kind of knowing that blooms too late to save you, but early enough to scar you. I crouched beneath the open dining room window, heart hammering against my ribs, the summer air thick and heavy. Inside, Blake's voice rang out, casual and cruel. "She's been so clingy lately," he sighed. "Always asking questions. Always needing to know where I am." Tyler's laugh followed. "That's wives for you." "No," Blake insisted. "Sophie's different. She still thinks we're something. Still trying to fix things." My stomach twisted. Max spoke next, slurring slightly. "So the plan's set?" Blake chuckled. "Perfectly. We blindfold her, drive her around for an hour, and dump her at that old abandoned gas station off Route 9. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. "When she finally makes it home," Blake continued, "she'll get the message. That I'm done. That I'm moving on." "And she won't fight the divorce?" Tyler asked. "Not after this," Blake said confidently. "This will break her just enough." Someone popped open a beer. The sound cracked the heavy air. "And then?" Max asked. "And then Brooke moves in," Blake said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "No more sneaking around." Brooke giggled. Her voice cut through me like glass. "About time," she purred. The patio erupted in laughter. And I stood there, shoes sinking into the dirt, the weight of their words pressing down on my chest. It wasn't just betrayal. It was orchestration. They weren't just done with me. They wanted to humiliate me on the way out. I stumbled back from the window, tripping over a garden hose, skinning my palms on the concrete. The world tilted. I pressed my forehead to my knees, breathing in the scent of crushed grass and dust, trying to hold myself together. Happy birthday, Sophie. I couldn't go back inside. I couldn't look at him. So I left. I walked until my legs shook, until the sun dipped below the horizon, until the streetlights flickered on one by one. And when I finally returned hours later, Blake was passed out on the couch, a half-empty bottle of bourbon dangling from his hand. Penny, our golden retriever, lifted her head from her spot by the door, thumped her tail once against the floor, and let out a low whine. I knelt down, buried my face in her fur, and cried the silent, hollow cries of someone who had nothing left to break. The next morning, I moved like a ghost. Made coffee. Folded laundry. Paid the bills. Pretended. All while the clock in my head ticked louder and louder. By noon, I was in our bedroom, pulling the battered suitcase from the back of the closet. I packed only what mattered. My grandmother's locket. My passport. A few changes of clothes. The burner phone I'd bought months ago, hidden in my sock drawer for emergencies. Cash $5,000, slowly withdrawn in small amounts from our joint account over the last 6 months, tucked into the lining of my boot. No notes. No explanations. No goodbye. Only a plan. That night, I made Blake's favorite dinner. Pot roast. Roasted potatoes. Carrots glazed in brown sugar. I smiled when he complimented the meal. I laughed at his dumb jokes. I kissed him goodnight. And I lay beside him in the dark, listening to his breathing, memorizing the ceiling, the creak of the fan, the faint hum of the street outside. The life I was about to leave behind. I woke before dawn. Packed the suitcase into the trunk of my car. Wiped down every surface I touched. Left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter. The house was silent when I slipped out. No dramatics. No slammed doors. Just the quiet, final closing of a chapter. By the time Blake and his friends blindfolded me that afternoon and drove me out to the abandoned gas station, I was already gone. Physically present, yes. Emotionally? Spiritually? Gone. When they laughed and sped away, thinking they'd shattered me, I smiled behind their dust. Because I wasn't broken. I was free. I waited 10 minutes before moving. The sun beat down hard, turning the cracked pavement beneath my heels into a skillet. Sweat trickled between my shoulder blades. A breeze stirred the dust, but it brought no relief. I stood still, frozen in the quiet aftermath of their laughter. This was real. They'd left me. Not just symbolically. Not emotionally. Literally. On the side of a road. In a forgotten place. On my birthday. And it hit me all at once. I was alone. No safety net. No one coming to help. Just me and the sound of cicadas. For the first time since I heard their plan, fear cracked through the surface. What if the Uber driver didn't show up? What if Blake came back? What if this was the wrong choice? The voice in my head, the one I had silenced for years, began whispering doubts. You're not strong enough. You've never lived alone. You don't even speak French. My fingers trembled as I reached down and pulled off my right boot. From its lining, I withdrew the small roll of cash I'd hidden there weeks ago. $800. All that remained after hotel deposits and my emergency airline ticket. I ducked behind the gas station building, away from the open road. My dress clung to my skin. I peeled it off, folded it neatly, and stuffed it into my tote. Then I changed into jeans, a loose gray t-shirt, and a baseball cap, simple, anonymous, forgettable. I checked the burner phone. 11:48 a.m. 12 minutes to go. I sat on the cracked concrete, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the brittle grass pushing through the cracks. 12 minutes. 12 minutes between the life I was born into and the life I would choose. I thought of my mother. She died when I was 20, just before Blake proposed. She never met him. I used to think that was the greatest tragedy of my adulthood. Now I think it was her blessing. She would have seen through him. She would have told me I was shrinking. She would have told me love doesn't have to feel like survival. My eyes burned. I whispered a quiet apology to her. For staying so long. For forgetting who she raised me to be. The minutes ticked by. A rusted sign creaked in the wind. And then a low rumble. A blue sedan rolled down the empty road and slowed near the station. Its windows were down. The driver looked around, puzzled. When he spotted me standing in the shade behind the building, he raised a hand. "Mrs. Carter," he called out, using the name I'd given. I stepped forward. "That's me." He opened the back door. "Where to?" "Marston Pawn," I said. The car pulled away, and with it, my old life vanished in the rearview mirror. Mr. Marston was exactly as I remembered, older than time itself, with heavy glasses, thick fingers, and a voice like gravel. His pawn shop smelled like metal polish and forgotten stories. "What can I do for you, miss?" he asked. I pulled out a velvet pouch and laid it gently on the counter. Inside, my diamond engagement ring, wedding band, and a pair of emerald earrings Blake had given me for our 10th anniversary. I didn't flinch when Mr. Marston picked them up. Didn't look away when he examined each one under the shop light. He named a price. It was more than I expected. "I'll take it," I said. "He studied me for a long time." "You running?" I didn't answer. He reached under the counter and pulled out a small metal case. Inside, a registered, legal handgun. "Don't sell these often," he said quietly. "But something tells me you're going to be traveling alone for a while." I stared at it. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I planned to use it. But because in that moment, I understood what protection really meant. Control. Preparedness. Freedom. I nodded and accepted it. Mr. Marston said nothing more. When I left the pawn shop, the heat outside felt different. Like a weight had been lifted from the air. I took a cab to the bus station. Bought a one-way ticket under a fake name to New York City. The bus wouldn't leave for another 3 hours. I found a bench in the far corner, tucked into the shadows, and sat with my bag clutched tightly to my chest. Around me, life moved on, families arguing over luggage, college kids scrolling their phones, a man humming softly to himself. And me, a woman shedding her skin in silence. I pulled out my notebook, one I had packed quietly in the weeks leading up to today, and made a list. Paris hostel reservation. Convert dollars to euros. Buy SIM card. Learn 10 new French words per day. Open anonymous bank account. Never look back. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't grieving, but because I didn't want to give Blake one more drop of my pain. The bus arrived just after sunset. I boarded last. Took the window seat. Let the city pass me in blurs of neon and headlights. And somewhere in the hum of the tires and the quiet breathing of strangers, I realized I wasn't scared anymore. Not because I knew what would happen next, but because, for the first time in years, I was choosing what happened next. Paris was never the plan. But when the bus dropped me in New York, and I stepped into that internet cafe with my burner phone and fake name, it felt like the only place far enough to disappear. I booked a one-way ticket to Charles de Gaulle using my maiden name, Isabella Chen. The name felt foreign in my mouth, like a souvenir from a life I barely remembered. The flight had a layover in Iceland. I barely ate. Barely slept. I stared out the window as miles of ocean slipped beneath me, wondering if I was flying away from ruin or toward it. Nice was not Paris, but I couldn't afford Paris. The coastal city was quieter, slower, more forgiving. It smelled like salt and citrus. My hostel was tucked above a bakery where the scent of bread wove into my dreams. I arrived with 2 bags, $7,000 in cash from the pawn shop, and a list. Get a job. Learn French. Stay invisible. Invisible was easy. No one noticed me. I was just another tired American girl fumbling over her bonjour. The hard part was surviving. I walked everywhere to save money. Ate cheap lentils and baguettes. Watched strangers sip wine on sidewalk cafes and wondered who I had to become to feel that free. Jobs were harder to come by. My resume was thin, deliberately vague. No real references. No degrees that could be traced. Eventually, I found one. A receptionist opening at a small financial office, Lambert Consile. They needed someone to answer phones in English for foreign clients. My French was atrocious, but I smiled a lot and said oui in all the right places. They gave me a 3-month trial. My desk sat near the entrance. Each morning, I practiced. Bonjour, Lambert Consile. Comment puis-je vous aider? I mispronounced everything. The phones terrified me. My supervisor, Giselle, was cold and clipped, the kind of woman who wore heels that echoed and disapproval like perfume. But she noticed how I stayed late. How I organized files without being asked. How I read the reports, not just filed them. Sometimes at night, I'd sit at my desk after everyone left, reading market trends like they were love letters. Numbers had always made sense to me. They didn't lie. They didn't leave. One Friday evening, as I filed the last of that week's invoices, I found a duplicate payment. A client had been paid twice, an error worth nearly 40,000 euros. I hesitated. Sophie would have stayed quiet. But Isabella? She knocked on the director's door. Philippe Lambert looked at me like I'd grown a second head. You read these? He asked, lifting the folder. I nodded. Why? They interest me, I said simply. He didn't fire me. On Monday, he promoted me to administrative assistant. I got a keycard, a nicer chair, access to reports and meetings I never thought I'd sit through. And then one day, he brought a man into the office. American. Salt and pepper hair. Tailored navy suit that whispered money. Julian Cross, CEO of a global shipping company. He needed someone to organize his European portfolio review. Philippe introduced me as the sharpest eyes in the office. Julian shook my hand. Firm. Cool. Curious. We worked together for weeks. He was intense but respectful. He listened more than he spoke. He asked smart questions. And unlike Blake, he read every report I sent him. Once, during a late session, he looked up from a document I'd annotated and said, "Most analysts miss this pattern." I shrugged. I pay attention. He nodded slowly. That's rare. Our conversations stayed professional. But something shifted. He started asking my opinion, first on markets, then on people. We shared coffee, then dinner, then silences that didn't need filling. He never asked about my past. I never volunteered. It felt sacred, that unspoken rule. I didn't need him to fix me. He didn't try. He simply saw me. And, for the first time, I wanted to be seen. 6 months in, the shipping industry took a hit. Global instability. Fuel prices. Everyone panicked. Julian called me in at 2 a.m. The board wants to liquidate assets, he said. Don't, I replied instantly. Bye. Now. He stared. That's risky. Or brilliant, I said, sliding over a report I'd been preparing for weeks, just in case. 3 months later, his company doubled in value. The press called it foresight. Genius. Luck. Julian knew better. He offered me a consulting contract, then an office in his Paris apartment, then something more. We didn't fall in love like in the movies. There was no grand kiss in the rain. No declarations under moonlight. We built something quieter. Stronger. One night, after a late dinner, he poured 2 glasses of wine and said, I trust you more than anyone in my company. I believed him. Because I trusted myself. I didn't need a man to save me. But I'd found one who'd stand beside me while I rebuilt. And brick by careful brick, I did. A new life. A new name. A new version of myself. One that no longer flinched at her reflection. One that didn't beg to be chosen. One that had already chosen herself. It had been 3 years. 3 years since that gas station. 3 years since I stood alone in the dust and heat, watching the only life I'd ever known speed away. Now, I stood on the deck of a yacht in Monaco, the salt breeze lifting the hem of my linen dress, a glass of wine in my hand. Julian sat across from me, reading quietly, his brow furrowed. We were reviewing a proposal, a last-minute pitch from a struggling American construction firm looking for overseas investment. He handed me the file. They're desperate. Revenues down. Lawsuits pending. Take a look. I flipped the folder open. The name hit me like a whisper. Lane Brothers Construction. And beneath it, CEO, Blake Lane. The world didn't stop. My hands didn't shake. Instead, I felt an almost clinical curiosity, the way you'd study a bruise long after it stopped hurting. I scanned the documents. Familiar phrasing. Desperate projections. Inflated claims. Julian watched me closely. You know them. I nodded once. I did. I spent the next 3 hours doing what I had trained myself to do, analyze without emotion. The company was circling the drain. Years of mismanagement, toxic leadership, and poor financial judgment had eaten away its foundation. They were drowning, and they wanted us to throw a rope. Julian trusted my word more than any metric. When I handed him the report, my voice was calm. Recommend decline. High risk. Low return. No integrity in leadership. He didn't question it. A week later, I flew to Geneva to meet with the European Investment Forum. I didn't know Blake would be there. He spotted me in the lobby, 3 steps into the marble hall, surrounded by polished executives and glass walls. His face blanched. Sophie? My name, and his voice didn't sound like it used to. It sounded small. I turned. He looked older, thinner, the smugness gone, replaced with uncertainty. His tie was crooked. Sophie, he repeated, as if saying it again would make me less real. Hi, is it really you? I smiled. Hello, Blake. His eyes darted to my name badge. Isabella Chin, lead financial strategist, Cross Maritime Holdings. I didn't know, he stammered. You're here? With them. With myself, I said. He laughed nervously. Wow, you look different. I tilted my head. So do you. There was silence. Heavy and clumsy. Then he said, I've been trying to reach your company for weeks. We need help. I know, I said. I reviewed your proposal. And I recommended we pass. His face fell. Why? I looked him in the eye. Because your numbers were dishonest. Because your leadership record is unstable. Because we don't invest in people who don't value what they have until it's gone. His jaw clenched. That's not fair. Neither was dumping your wife at a gas station. He flinched. I waited. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. Of course he didn't. People like Blake don't regret what they do. They regret getting caught in the aftermath. He opened his mouth, closed it, and I realized something. I didn't care what he had to say. I didn't need closure. Didn't need revenge. Didn't need him to hurt the way I had. I had something better. I had peace. I turned to leave. Wait, he called. Are you happy? The question stopped me. I looked back at him. No, I said softly. I'm free. And that was better than happy. That night, Julian and I had dinner on the yacht. I told him everything. The gas station. The ring. The flight. The girl I used to be. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. Thank you, he said, for surviving. I blinked. He smiled. And for showing up to this life. A week later, I walked alone through the cobbled streets of Nice. No bodyguards. No driver. No Julian beside me. Just me. The air smelled of fresh bread and salt. The sun warmed the stones under my sandals. Children laughed in a nearby park, chasing a bright red ball. A woman in a floral dress balanced a basket of apricots on her hip. Life moved around me, quiet, ordinary, beautiful. I passed a small bookstore with dusty windows and paused to admire the handwritten signs taped to the glass. Poesy. Courage. A spoiler. Poetry. Courage. Hope. I smiled. For years I had lived as a shadow, waiting for permission to exist. Now I realized I needed no one's permission. I sat on a weathered bench facing the ocean, pulled out my worn notebook, and scribbled a letter to myself. To the girl who once begged to be chosen, /N, you don't need to be chosen by anyone else. /N, you chose yourself. /N, and that's enough. /N, that will always be enough. I closed the notebook. Breathed deep. The Mediterranean glittered in the afternoon sun, endless and wide, like a life waiting to be lived. I stood up and walked forward. No fear. No apologies. No looking back. Only forward. Only free.